September 7th, 1191. Two armies are about to meet on this coastal plain that have never heard of each other, speak no common language, and have no shared concept of what a battlefield is supposed to look like. One of them is about to discover that everything they know about how war works is wrong. 15,000 Crusaders are marching south along the Palestinian coast in full iron armor. Chainmail hauberks over padded gambeson, iron helmets, kite shields. The Mediterranean is on their left, open ground baking at 40 degrees on their right. Crossbow bolts and arrows have been landing in the column since dawn. Men are bleeding through their padding. Horses are stumbling. Richard's order has not changed once in 3 days. Hold the column. Do not break. Do not charge. Keep walking. 10,000 samurai are watching them from the ridge. Not Saracens, not Turks. Warriors from the other end of the world. Men who spent 3 years in the Genpei Civil War and did not lose a single field engagement. Mounted archers carrying the daikyu, a laminated bow 2 meters long, capable of accurate fire at 80 paces from a full gallop. Infantry with naginata, a 2-meter pole with a 40-centimeter blade built for one specific purpose, cutting a horse's legs out from under its rider at the moment of charge. And commanding them, Minamoto no Yoshitsune, 23 years old. The general who won the Battle of Ichi-no-Tani by leading cavalry down a cliff face so steep, his own commanders told him it was physically impossible. He listened. Then he did it anyway. Before this day ends, 1,400 men on this plain will be dead. Not the ones who were supposed to die. Not the ones any commander on either side expected to lose. The ones whose doctrine met something it was never built for. But the samurai have never seen a crossbow. Subscribe and hit the bell. If this matchup is worth your time, a like takes 2 seconds, and drop your idea for the next battle in the comments. A crossbow bolt leaves the prod at 160 kilometers per hour. It carries 300 joules of kinetic energy, enough to punch through a ring of chainmail and the padding beneath it at 150 paces. The man behind it never exposes himself. He steps out from behind a pavis, a wooden shield 1 meter tall planted in the ground, fires, steps back, reloads in 20 seconds, and does it again. He is not a warrior. He is a machine with a trigger. Richard has 4,000 of them in this column. The daikyu is 2 meters of laminated bamboo, wood, and leather, generating 160 newtons of draw force, roughly twice what an English longbow requires. At 80 paces from a gallop, a trained archer puts an arrow through a gap the width of 3 fingers. His rate of fire is 3 times higher than any crossbowman alive. A European knight takes 4 years to learn to ride and fight. A samurai archer takes 10 years to do what he does on horseback. There is no equivalent in the Western world in 1191. One bolt punches through armor at distance. One arrow demands a decade of the human body. They are not equivalent weapons. They are solutions to completely different problems. And today, those problems are each other. The Crusader column is built around one idea: collective punishment. No single man matters. The pavis wall moves forward as one surface. The knights behind it do not charge until Richard gives the order. They absorb fire, hold formation, and wait. It is not a tactic, it is a doctrine. And it works because it denies the enemy the one thing harassment cavalry needs: a reaction. Yoshitsune's army is built around the opposite idea: individual excellence multiplied across 10,000 men. Every samurai identifies the strongest opponent on the field, closes with him, and destroys him. The Genpei War produced warriors who took fortified positions with 200 men and held river crossings against 2,000. They are not soldiers in the European sense. They are the most dangerous individual fighters of the 12th century, operating under a commander who has never lost a field engagement. The column does not offer individual opponents. It offers a wall. Richard's knights wear hauberks of riveted iron rings over padded gambeson 2 centimeters thick. A daikyu arrow at combat range penetrates the gambeson. It will not reliably stop a knight. The crossbow bolt at the same range goes through both and still has energy to kill the horse behind the man. That asymmetry exists before a single charge is launched. Yoshitsune has watched the column for 2 hours from the ridge. He sees the pavis screen, the crossbowmen stepping in and out, the knights standing in total stillness under continuous arrow fire. He understands discipline when he sees it. What he has never encountered is a formation that refuses to answer provocation at all, that absorbs everything and keeps walking as if the men dying at its edges are simply the cost of forward movement. He has one advantage Richard does not know about yet. The Naginata infantry, moving toward the rear of the column, cannot be seen from the front. Neither can the horses hear them coming, over the sound of their own armor. At dawn, the samurai cavalry moves to range. 2,000 mounted archers fan out across the open ground east of the column in a wide crescent, staying at 120 paces. Close enough for the daikyu, outside reliable crossbow range. They ride in shallow passes left to right, releasing at the apex of each turn, then pulling away before the pavase wall can respond. It is the same harassment pattern the Crusaders absorbed for 3 days out of Acre. Richard recognizes it immediately. His order does not change. Hold the column, keep walking. For the first 40 minutes, it works. A crossbowman steps from behind his pavies, tracks a rider moving left at full gallop, leads the target by 2 body lengths, and releases. The bolt covers 120 paces in under half a second. The samurai archer never sees it leave the prod. He is already turning for his next pass when the bolt takes his horse through the neck. Horse and rider go down together. The men around him pull wide. No one announces the loss. No one stops. The crescent keeps moving. The samurai sees the same event differently. He releases at 80 paces, clean form, full draw, the arrow entering the chainmail at the shoulder of a knight on the column's eastern face. The knight stumbles, grabs the man beside him, keeps walking. The arrow is still in him, and he keeps walking. In 3 years of the Genpei War, this archer has never seen a man take a full draw hit at 80 paces and remain standing. He reaches for another arrow. Something is wrong with this enemy, and he cannot name what it is. Yoshitsune reads the first hour correctly. The crossbow is not a bow. It does not require the body. It requires the mechanism. Any man who can load it can kill with it. The pavas wall does not thin under casualties the way a samurai line would. Replace the men, the wall stays. He cannot harass this column into disorder. He cannot provoke it into breaking formation. He cannot fight it the way he has fought every enemy in Japan. He pulls the mounted archers back. Now the constraint hits. The Crusader heavy cavalry cannot pursue. A destrier in full barding weighs 200 kilograms more than a samurai mount. On open ground, the samurai cavalry simply leaves. Every time a knight kicks forward in pursuit, he opens a gap in the column that takes 3 minutes to close and costs 2 men to cover. Richard knows this. He's been absorbing the same problem since the column left Acre. The knights cannot chase. The crossbowmen cannot advance without the knights. The column can only do one thing: keep walking and absorb the cost. It is winning tactically and hemorrhaging men doing it. Yoshitsune sends 300 Naginata infantry wide to the south. They move on foot, parallel to the column, staying below a low ridge that runs along the coastal plain, invisible from the front, slow, deliberate. Their target is not the knights. Their target is the horses at the rear, the hospitallers, compressed into the tail of the formation, facing backward, absorbing arrow fire from 3 directions for 90 minutes straight. No man can hold a frightened horse indefinitely. At the 2-hour mark, the Naginata infantry crests the ridge and hits the hospitallers' flank at a run. 40 horses go down in the first exchange. The riders behind them have no room. The column is too tight. The sea is 40 meters to the left. The infantry is coming from the right. The Grand Master of the Hospitallers sends a rider to Richard with one message: we cannot hold. Richard sends one word back: hold. The rider returns to find the Hospitallers already moving, not retreating, charging. 200 knights in full armor break east without orders, directly into the Naginata line. At the exact moment Yoshitsune's reserve cavalry comes over the ridge behind them, the column tears open. The Hospitallers do not break the samurai line. They hit it at full gallop, 200 knights in iron moving at 40 kilometers per hour. And the Naginata infantry holds for 90 seconds before the weight of the charge pushes through. 90 seconds is enough. Yoshitsune's reserve cavalry is already inside the column gap. What follows is not a battle. It is 2 separate emergencies happening simultaneously. On the eastern face, Knights and samurai cavalry grind against each other in open ground, where neither doctrine works. Heavy armor cannot build momentum. Mounted archers cannot disengage. Men die because they are standing next to other men who are dying. On the western face, Richard holds the front 2/3 of the column together by personal presence alone. He rides the line. He turns horses back by hand. The column does not collapse. It contracts. By nightfall, the numbers are fixed. Within 3 hours of the Hospitallers' charge, the Crusaders lose between 900 and 1,100 men, roughly double the historical losses at Arsuf. The difference is entirely the gap, 90 seconds of open access to the column's unprotected interior, produced by 2 hours of unrelieved flank pressure, and one word that arrived too late. The samurai losses reach between 800 and 1,000 men by the same hour, higher than Yoshitsune expected. The Pavis wall did not tire. It did not manage a horse. It simply reloaded and fired at consistent range until there were fewer targets to fire at. At the tactical level, both commanders made the right decisions. Richard held 15,000 men under continuous fire for 2 hours and lost less than 8% before a single subordinate broke. That is what happens when one unit's breaking point lives at the rear and the column has nowhere to go but forward. At the operational level, Yoshitsune read the column correctly, engineered the gap, and delivered his reserve at the exact right moment. It was not enough to stop the column. It was enough to bleed it. Neither of them won. In the days that follow, Richard reaches Arsuf, reduced but intact. He consolidates, counts his dead, and continues south. The pace slows. The operational tempo he built over 3 days out of Acre is gone. Yoshitsune withdraws into the hills east of the plain with between 7,000 and 8,200 men still capable of fighting. He has no siege equipment. He cannot hold ground he does not occupy. He watches the column move south until it disappears. What changed is the ground between Acre and Arsuf is covered in 1,900 men from 2 civilizations that had never heard of each other before this morning. What did not change is the reason both armies were on that ground in the first place. 1,900 men died on this plain today. Not because one side was better, not because one commander made a mistake, because 2 doctrines met on ground neither was built for, and the point where they intersected cost exactly that many lives. Consider what the crossbow changed. At the historical Arsuf, the Crusader column absorbed Saracen harassment for the same 2 hours on the same ground, and lost roughly 700 men. Against samurai mounted archers with 3 times the rate of fire, the Pavis wall held the first phase to comparable losses, and kept the column intact for 120 minutes. Without it, the eastern face thins within 40 minutes, and the column fractures before Yoshitsune needs his reserve. The crossbow did not win this engagement. It extended it long enough for discipline to become the deciding factor instead of firepower. It democratizes killing at range. The Daikyu requires 10 years of the human body. The crossbow requires 3 days of instruction and a wooden mechanism any man can operate. What it cannot do is decide when to use that killing. That decision still belongs to the man behind the pavis. And on this day, the man who made the wrong decision was not behind a pavis. He was on a horse at the rear of the column, holding a formation that had been bleeding for 2 hours, waiting for a word that did not come in time. Consider what the crossbow did not change. Jerusalem is 120 kilometers south. The column is moving toward it at the pace of an exhausted formation that has just lost 1,100 men. Yoshitsune is in the hills to the east, with no siege equipment and no supply line into the coastal corridor. Neither army is closer to its objective than it was at dawn. Tactical outcomes and strategic realities are different currencies. You can win the morning and still be exactly where you started by nightfall. Historically, roughly 700 Crusaders died at Arsuf. On this plain, against this opponent, 1,100 died. That is 400 additional men who would have come home. 400 men with names, with families, with villages in France or England or the Holy Roman Empire waiting for them. They did not die because the samurai were better warriors. They died because the Hospitallers broke, and the Hospitallers broke because 2 hours of naginata pressure against an unrelieved rear guard is a physical limit, not a failure of courage. 400 deaths is the precise cost of meeting an opponent whose doctrine targets the exact structural weakness in yours. Not the cost of losing, the cost of holding. If this matchup made you think, subscribe and hit the bell. Every video on this channel is built the same way. Two sides, equal respect, no easy answers. If you have a matchup you want to see, Vikings versus Mongols, Roman legions versus Aztec warriors, any combination that makes you wonder, put it in the comments. The best idea becomes the next video.